So you have water over there.
Nice bottles.
There's a European Union directive which means that you can't actually separate. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Powell, and I'm the director of the Elcano Royal Institute. And I would first of all like to thank the Ateneo de Madrid for hosting us this morning in this wonderful building. The Ateneo is one of my favorite institutions. I think it's an expression of a very vibrant civil society that we're very fortunate to have in our nation's capital. So it's wonderful to be here. And it's particularly nice to be here, of course, in the company of such distinguished speakers. And I would like to introduce them very, very briefly because they are all extremely well known. We're very fortunate today to have with us former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. Thank you very much for being with us today. And former Foreign Minister Nasser al-Kidwa. Thank you, both of you, for making time to be with us. They have recently produced a peace plan, and the main purpose of today's meeting is for us all to become acquainted with this peace plan, which I think is very ambitious. Time will tell whether it's viable, whether it's realistic, but I think it's an extremely opportune exercise, and I think we would like to start by congratulating them both for having taken this initiative. They will have a conversation with our other two speakers, Cristina Gallac. Thank you very much, Cristina, for joining us. As you know, Cristina is one of Spain's leading public intellectuals. She's had a very long and distinguished career in Brussels and here in Madrid. And she currently directs the Global Women Leaders Voices, which is an advocacy group which works for gender equality and multilateral institutions. Thank you for being here. And José Vericat. José Vericat has recently been appointed senior analyst at the Elcano Royal Institute for the Middle East and North Africa. So he's going to be a rather busy man. And we're very, very fortunate to have him with us. So thank you, José, not only for being here today, but for having put this event together. So as I was saying, this really couldn't be more timely. Only 3 days ago, of course, we were commemorating a very sad anniversary, the anniversary of the horrific Hamas attack on Israel, in which some 1,200 people were killed. As you know, some 250 hostages were taken, of whom about 100 are still thought to be, hopefully, alive in Gaza. And this, of course, was followed, as we all know, by an Israeli military intervention, occupation of Gaza, and as a result of that, some 42,000 people have been killed, millions have been displaced. Probably nobody in Gaza has been left unaffected or untouched. And of course, as a result of hostilities, both in Gaza and more recently in Lebanon, some 200,000 Israeli citizens have also been displaced. The conflict is spreading. The conflict seems to be escalating. Most recently, of course, in Lebanon, where some 2,000 people have already lost their lives. And Iran, which of course was sustaining both Hamas and Hezbollah, has now recently launched rockets and missiles at Israel. So I think it's fair to say that the Middle East is on fire, and nobody seems to be in a particularly good situation to put that fire out. As I'm speaking, the big question mark is, how will Israel respond to those recent Iranian missile attacks. Yom Kippur starts tomorrow. So it's unlikely, perhaps, that there will be a military operation launched by Israel in the next 24 hours or so, but everyone is, I think, expecting some form of escalation. And of course, if it does take place, the big question is whether an all-out military confrontation between Israel and Iran is now inevitable. We are also 26 days away from the US presidential election. And I think it's fair to say that Joe Biden has become a lame duck president who is either unwilling or unable to rein in the Netanyahu government. And of course, we are all asking ourselves what will happen if Trump wins the election on the 5th of November. At the same time, of course, Russia is enjoying the distraction that all of this is providing from the war in Ukraine, a brutal, totally unjustified, unwarranted, and illegal attack on Ukrainian sovereignty. And in the meantime, of course, China is observing all of this, no doubt, with interest. And perhaps the European Union, sadly, is also condemned to a position in which it can merely express concern and, to some extent, impotence. So I will hand over to Christina and Jose now. They will conduct this conversation. Christina, if you would like to kick off. Thank you all for being here, and thank you.
I'll kick off with pleasure. Thanks for the scene setting for all of us. And I think the first question is very obvious. In this situation where the international community has completely failed to restrain the violence, in this situation where we have not been able to get a ceasefire, your proposal, Prime Minister and Minister, is the notable exception, And we are really keen and interested in knowing what is your proposal.
Prime Minister, if you would like to start.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be your guest here. It's a spectacular hall here, which, you know, we are having lately this opportunity to go into different places and to speak and to present our points of view. Rarely do we have the opportunity to do it in such a remarkable, historical, beautiful building as this one. So, you know, I thank you again. I don't think that the international community could have prevented the eruption of the hostilities in October of 23. It may have done much more a lot before, because I think that the international community was carried away by all kinds of inflated hopes that somehow Israel and the Palestinians can manage their conflict without without breaking through the limits of our areas into something which becomes a lot bigger and a lot more threatening. Both sides were responsible for this eruption. Why, they don't hear me?
Yeah, I think they do. Just a short interruption. Go ahead.
All right. I think that obviously what happened in October 7th, 2023 was totally unforgettable and unforgivable. And I don't think that there was anyone in the world that would not expect Israel to do something in response, considering the brutality, the savagery of the attack, of the horrific attack of Hamas against Israelis. And Israel reacted. I think that, and I said it publicly, first in Israel, prime time Israeli television in every possible way. I wrote it in articles almost 8 months ago and even more, that the war should have stopped then. I think that Israel did an unavoidable military action in Gaza, but we have achieved most of what we could militarily long ago, and there was no need to feather it and feather it and feather it up until today. It didn't help save any of the Israeli hostages. It just caused more casualties among the Israeli soldiers unnecessarily, and of course also the killing of so many innocent Palestinians that live in Gaza, which became victims of this confrontation. It has to be said in this context that when on the 8th of October or the 9th of October, all of the world leaders, starting with Joe Biden, but also Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, Prime Minister of Italy and of Holland, and you name it, when all of them said Israel has a right to respond, and Israel has and no one can say to Israel, don't do what you need to do, whatever, that they didn't understand that the immediate victims of the Israeli military action will be Palestinians that live in Gaza. Because everyone knew that Hamas is embedded inside the most densely populated area in the world, underground and on ground, underground of the hospitals, of schools, of mosques, of public facilities, with all these city of tunnels, and that there are hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living there, and Israel will not be able to reach out for the Hamas without affecting the Palestinians that live there, which were not involved in terror. In any way, whether those who said sanctioned Israel that to do what it did were not aware of the possible ramifications of this or not, remains to be discussed separately. But in any event, I thought that we should have stopped the war much earlier, and we should have stopped it any minute. This minute, yesterday, as I said, 8 months ago or 10 months ago, it could have been stopped, and that Hamas was already then suffering a devastation as a result of the superiority of the Israeli military operation. We were asleep on the 7th of October, but once the Israeli system rose up to its feet and started to fight, it was obvious that we will break down the military capacity of Hamas, as we did. We should have stopped long ago, if it probably could have been the only possible way to bring back all the hostages. And the more we wait, the less number of hostages we will have. Mm-hmm. I started to think of how to emerge from this. And separately and independently, Mr. al-Kidwa thought about it. So he will talk about his side. At some point, we were brought to some kind of a contact. We didn't know each other. We never met before. Somehow, our different careers, me on behalf of Israel, he on behalf of the Palestinian people, it didn't bring us into any contact. But we met through the Zoom at the beginning, mm-hmm. and we started to share opinions and feelings and attitudes and prospects of what can be done. And it turned out that quite quickly it became evident to both of us that we look at things more or less in the same way. Of course, there are differences, and there will be differences, and I believe that there will be time that we will argue about certain things. But fundamentally, we have the same attitude. And that's what we have put in writing and signed and publicized, because we thought that at a time when Palestinians and Israelis are fighting and killing each other, that if a person who is the former foreign minister of the Palestinian Authority and the very well-regarded Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations sits down and talks with a former Israeli prime minister, and they can present a shared opinion about what needs to be done from now on, not fighting about the past. There is a lot to argue about the past, but instead of fighting about the past, moving forward towards a different future is something worth doing. Now, in a very concise manner, we agree that we have to stop the war immediately. We agree that the hostages has to be returned back. We agree that there will be Palestinian prisoners that will be released, agreed number of Palestinian prisoners. We agree that Israel will have to pull out completely from Gaza. Gaza is not part of Israel, has never been part of Israel. It's a Palestinian territory, and it has to be run by Palestinians, and Palestinians there will have to be a security force that will be mandatory to prevent further attacks from Gaza towards Israel, but there will have to be a mechanism that will take over the control of Gaza in order to try and rebuild Gaza and administer Gaza, not by a terrorist organization, but by a serious bureaucratic administrative force that will be made mostly by Palestinians, of course, will be connected somehow to the Palestinian Authority, which is the legal framework of the Palestinian people. Then we also agreed about the basic principles for the peace, comprehensive peace between Israel and the Palestinians, largely based on the efforts that I made when I was Prime Minister in 2008 and 2009, and what I presented then to the Palestinian president, who unfortunately failed to sign it. He never said no, but he never said yes. And the basic principles are that there is a two-state solution, a Palestinian state on the basis of 67 borders alongside the state of Israel, with a certain small part of the West Bank annexed to Israel, and equal-sized territory that was part of Israel before 67 will be integrated to the Palestinian state, that there will be a highway connecting Gaza to the West Bank, which never happened before, but which is part of the effort to create a Palestinian state made up of the West Bank and Gaza, and that somehow ought to be connected. We agreed that the Arab side of Jerusalem will be the capital of the Palestinian state. The other part will obviously continue to be the capital of the state of Israel. That the old city of Jerusalem will have no exclusive sovereignty of any country, not of Israel, not of the Palestinians. What I thought, and that's what I presented to Abu Mazen in 2008, I figured that in as long as there will be one flag, Israeli flag, on the Temple Mount, the Islamic world, the Muslim countries, not just the Palestinians, all of the Palestinians, all of them, will never acquiesce with it. The same goes the other way. If there will be one flag, the Palestinian flag, over the Temple Mount, the Jewish world will never acquiesce with it. So the only possible solution is that no one will have an exclusive political flag, and all believers will have free access to go to their places. And it will be administered by 5-nation trustship, of which Palestine and Israel will be part. All the other we haven't presented a comprehensive, detailed, meticulous peace plan, although I have it in mind, because we are not the leaders. We are former leaders. We are retirees. We are old guys. But we are all guys that believe that sometimes old people may have the wisdom and the courage to say what others do not.
Thanks. Great introduction to how this was born, out of two leaders that didn't know each other personally, and with a very solid basis or a strong basis or wide basis on what you had already presented in 2008. Those are very good details. I'd like to give the floor to Prime Minister, Foreign Minister Kina, former Foreign Minister.
It's not bad.
Maybe,
it's not bad.
She's promoted you already.
To tell us from your view of how this was born, and in particularly the reaction it has had. We know that there have been echoes in the media, but we don't know yet how the two leaderships, the Israeli and the Palestinian, has responded to that. And definitely those are important issues. So if you have had other elements to comment to us about the plan and the reaction.
Sure, but let me begin by thanking you and thank all of you for coming. Thank you, of course, for the Elcano Royal, and it's really very nice to be in Madrid, to be here and to be in Madrid, in Spain in general. As a Palestinian Arab, it means a lot for us because of history and because of political position as well, current political position. Anyway, let me give you a small secret how the gentleman to my left was involved. We were neighbors in Ramallah. So we managed to talk and we managed to arrange things, and probably that helped a little bit in arranging this event. Now, let me begin by the international community, because I think this is important. Frankly, from a Palestinian point of view, the international community was a disappointment. The international community failed in its duties. And while I do understand that there is two different points of view, there is the Palestinian and the Israelis, but I think we can agree that at least not a lot was done to save the situation in the Middle East and in the world. And furthermore, I think one of the results of what's happening now is indeed the destruction of the international system that was painstakingly built after the Second World War. And I think that should be a wake-up call for everybody, because we all have vested interest in maintaining this system. But we have a situation now where, with all due respect, we have a foreign minister of Israel that declared the Secretary General of the United Nations persona non grata. Or we have a government that decides to destroy UNRWA, for instance, an organ of the United Nations, and things like that. Every day you see things like that. In any case, one of the lessons that we learned, that both sides have to do more. That while it is important to have the assistance and the help and the support by the international community, it is probably as important, maybe even a little bit more, for the two sides to do what they have to do. And here comes one of the reasons why we felt that we have to move. And by the way, both of us are not peaceniks. Okay? We're not light-hearted guys. I mean, this is a tough guy and I am a tough guy as well. And we both want to serve the interest of our peoples. We have to have this in mind. It's not like we want to love each other. We don't want to love each other, but we want to live with each other, to coexist with each other, because honestly, the only possible solution, forget about the nonsense that sometimes is being said, the only possible solution is the existence of the two states. Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace and security on the basis of mutual recognition, of course, but based on 1967 borders, with swap of territory as we agreed 4.4 that was proposed by Mr. Olmert during his tenure in office. That's the only solution. So we either kill each other, annihilate each other, or we coexist with each other. This is the only way forward. Now, I don't want to get into the details, but our proposal, as Mr. Olmert said, covered three very important issues, including the overall political solution, the necessity, the absolute necessity to stop the war in Gaza, and how, and of course Jerusalem and the future of the city as important place for the whole world. It's not only for the Israelis and Palestinians or Muslims, but I used to tell some friends that, let's say, the Vatican, for instance, now it's silent because others are doing the job. But when the time comes, they have interest and they want to maintain their interest, of course. So everybody will be involved because this is the city. The city does not accept kind of monopoly, neither Israeli monopoly nor Palestinian monopoly. It has to be open, it has to be owned by everybody, and the history of the region was told by the history of Jerusalem. We need to understand that. But of course, again, as he said also, we understood that we are not in power. So we can take position and hope that this position will make a difference. But at the end of the day, it is the people in power who will make the decisions and who will continue negotiations over the details of what we proposed, plus other important issues, including settlement, settlers, refugees, and the additional security measures and things like that. Now, your point about the reaction. I want to be very frank with you. As I do personally believe, irrespective of what Mr. Olmert does believe, that as long as Mr. Netanyahu in power, there will be no progress.
That?
As long as Mr. Netanyahu is in power, is the prime minister, there will be no progress. We are not going to achieve
There is no
that.
disagreement between us.
Okay, excellent, good. So we have very bad situation. And the way I see it, what we proposed are not about today. It's about tomorrow. Because we need to change the situation. The Israelis need to take care of their share and the Palestinians need to take care of their share. We need to change the situation, to change the leadership, and then we can move together towards the future. Because we all need to understand that there is no other way, as I said. I mean, more war, more blood, more tear, more pain, more agony will lead to nowhere. We have to change that, change the thinking, change the culture, change the language, change the way we deal with each other, we look at each other. And as I said, we don't need to love each other, but at least we need to accept each other and to start learning how to coexist together. So, probably the official Israel did not move, and the official Palestine did not move. But frankly, they don't count a lot. What we need to achieve is the support by the public on both sides, and then the support of some governments in the region and beyond. And I think we are making traction, not only in Spain, which I personally appreciate its positions, its policies on the Middle East, but also with others as well, including the United States of America, because like it or not, especially in light of the elections, we cannot ignore the United States. And for one, I don't want to think what might happen if Trump wins. No. I leave it to God, but I hope, along with many of us, I think, that Harris will make it, and at least we'll have some degree of continuity, even if not revolutionary development, but at least something that resembles progress and movement ahead, and then we can do probably we can do things better. Last thing I want to say, let's put our eyes on the period between 5th of November and 20th of January, especially if Harris wins. If Harris wins, this period might be the right moment to do something about the current situation, and we have to do a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Well, then we all see this is not a ceasefire plan, not a stop of violence plan, but a true hope plan. That should be more or less a way forward. Jose.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prime Minister. Minister, I want to address actually a question to a portion of the proposal that you suggest, and in particular the question of intra-Palestinian reconciliation that you have worked so much in, and also to how it pertains to your plan, reuniting the different Palestinian factions and the West Bank. Though perhaps most people listening today know very little about these negotiations, these were actually very, very important. I was very involved when we were living together in Ramallah in these intra-Palestinian negotiations in reuniting the West Bank and Gaza. I believe that they could have prevented the 7th of October. Can you tell us a little bit about this part of this is kind of the second part of the plan, why intra-Palestinian reconciliation is so important? What have you been trying to achieve? Also about Hamas, which continues to be a very important, very popular faction among Palestinians, and that is a challenge, certainly, for Israel and for the international community and for Palestinians themselves. Can Hamas change? What is the future of the Palestinian Islamists in the governance of Gaza? And related to this, to your particular proposal for governance of Gaza that you contain in the proposal, if you can tell us more and about this particular formula that you arrived at regarding the Council of Commissioners. If you can please speak
Very
about
easy
this.
question, of course, as you can all see. And I will not shy from telling you very frankly that the Palestinian situation is really miserable. We have a bunch of impotent in Ramallah, and we have a bunch of crazy guys in Gaza. And nevertheless, it's our destiny. We have to do something about it, and we have to change that. The first point you raised, Jose, is this important? Yes, it is very important. One of the reasons why is that this is a fact, the absence of the Palestinian player, the Palestinian maestro, led to the absence of a Palestinian position, which meant the absence of an Arab common position, which meant the absence of a common international position. Normally, it takes a Palestinian maestro to do all these things, which now does not exist. And that is one of the reasons why it's very important. Secondly, about Hamas. Before the war, I went to Gaza 4 times, and I met with all Palestinian factions, including Hamas, and I presented them with a vision about unification of the Palestinian movement and Gaza and how we can change the situation in Gaza. And at some point, Hamas told us, yes, we decided to work with you on the transitional body that you proposed in your vision. My answer was, okay, thank you very much, that's important, but that's not enough. We cannot do that. This is not the way forward. We need to agree on the basic principles first, because this is the measure, this is the yardstick through which we would know whether we are really committed to the same ideas and the same principles or not. So we didn't do that, but at least there was some movement, and in retrospect, I regret that we didn't do more, because had we done more, maybe we would have prevented all these atrocities from happening. Now, can Hamas change? I did say repeatedly that this war will lead to 1, new Israeli government, 2, new Palestinian leadership and 3 new Hamas. So the current Hamas might not be able to change, but there will be a new Hamas, meaning a new Islamic, hopefully nationalistic party that can play a different role in the Palestinian society generally. I personally believe that we should push for a complete change, a complete overhaul of the Palestinian situation in a way that we will have 3 trends. The Palestinian national democratic trend, which now being presented by Fatah, we need to have a new political movement. The national Islamic trend, that is now Hamas, and the national left or the national progressive trend. Now, of course, each of them might be presented by more than one party, but at least it's the new reconfiguration of the Palestinian political movement in light of not only the recent war, but in light of many things that have been happening in the world generally. We need to change as well because the old style cannot work, and that is one of the reasons why I do not support the idea that we need to start with the PLO, for instance, because a famous person suggested that. I don't think this is the right thing to do because first, we don't want the same PLO to continue. We need to have a new, rebuilt PLO through democratic elections that have to take place between 24 to 36 months after the end of the war in Gaza. The last point about our proposal in terms of the Transitional Council of Commissioners of Gaza. This is not our first compromise proposal. Our first proposal, it was not really a compromise, but first proposal that for Abbas to leave, along with his cronies. Because 19-year-old, enough French, 19 years of governance, for God's sake, who had this before? The guy is almost 90-year-old and 19-year-old presidency. So enough is enough, we need to change it. It didn't happen, of course. And then we proposed the compromise, the first compromise proposal, the ceremonial presidency with empowered government. And we were encouraged by the noise coming out from Washington. Renewed Palestinian Authority, reformed Palestinian Authority. Wow, we were excited. Finally, the Americans are pushing in the right direction. And all of a sudden, flip-flop, and they changed and they welcomed Mohammed Mustafa's government. And Mohammed Mustafa is a nice guy, but he is a little employee for Abbas, that's all. So nothing has changed, more entrenching of the same situation, nothing more. In light of that, we came up with additional compromise in the form of, okay, you want to stay like this, and the region as well as the Americans supported you, okay, but at least knowing that you will not be able to go to Gaza, you, as the president of the authority, could appoint the head of the Council of Commissioners, and the head of the Council of Commissioners will appoint the members, the commissioners themselves. So it's, having the same, organically linked, but it's not exactly the same. It's different enough to be accepted by the population, to be accepted by the region, to be accepted by donors, and things like that. And hopefully we'll do that. But we are not stubborn about that, because a friend of us, one Arab foreign minister, said, no, we want one government that takes care of the West Bank and Gaza. Be my guest, please. This was our first compromise proposal. We want that. If you can achieve that, if we can achieve that, that's better. But if we can't achieve that, at least we have the fallback position.
Thank you, Nasser.
Very good, very interesting. Mr. Prime Minister, we hear well your proposal, which is clearly two-state solution. But unfortunately, the facts on the ground, the recent years' history, the withdrawal of Gaza, the withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000, they basically lead us as an impossibility of a Palestinian state. So we are more into a dynamic that the new regional order being shaped as we speak is one that has no Palestinian state. So how do we reconcile the reality on the ground and a plan which is based on the two-state solution?
We are keep asked, both Dr. al-Kidwa and myself, from different sides, how serious you can be at a time when there is such an overwhelming opposition to the idea of a two-state solution. I mean, how serious it is. So, number one, I'd say, had it been popular, you wouldn't have asked us to come today to speak here. The reason you asked us, and not only you, but from
Many
everywhere,
people.
is because situation is the opposite. But serious people are looking for a way out of it, for a different way. And when, thank God, there are some people that are prepared to spell it out in the most explicit manner, up front, without hesitations, and without considerations of popularity within their own base, then it starts to be interesting. So, number one, when there is a war, such as we have now, which is a reflection of the intense confrontation that was underneath the ground, but which was waiting to emerge for the last 15 years. Because there were no any serious efforts made either by Israel or by the Palestinians to somehow embark on a more meaningful process of negotiations. Now, Dr. al-Kidwa said this is not something that we mean that can take place today, it's for tomorrow. Now, what does it mean? At some point, sooner than later, hopefully sooner than later, today, tomorrow, a month from now, 2 months, 3 months, the war will end. We'll stop the war, both in the south and subsequently also in the north. And just for the sake of discussion, this is what I argue within Israel. I say, okay, let's assume that we will have a stunning victory, the kind of victory that Netanyahu says he is aiming at. Total victory. What does it mean, total victory? That we will have eliminated all of the Hamas activists, all of the Hamas fighters. No one of them will remain. Yahya Sinwar and all his staff will be targeted, just as the leadership of Hezbollah. All right? And then what? We will still have 6 million people, Palestinians. What are we going to do with the 6 million people? Are we going to continue forever to occupy the territories? Are we going to continue forever to deny the Palestinians of self-determination, of the right for freedom of movement, for freedom of speech, for political rights, for voting? If that's what we want, then we are doomed, not the Palestinians, because Israel will become completely intolerable, unacceptable by the international community. Already now, there is a growing feeling of alienation within different parts of the international community. Not because I think some of them subscribe to the atrocities that were committed by Hamas, but because some of them, I can understand that in response to this, there ought to be a far-reaching way of resolving this conflict, and this is something that is incumbent on Israel to take part in, except that the Israeli present leadership is not prepared to do it. So what I think we need to do is to try and impact the public opinion in our country as part of the very bitter confrontation which we are now exercising in Israel by the opposition to the government, the opposition to Netanyahu, the opposition to the judicial pogrom that he called the reform that he wanted to create in Israel. I think that this will be the opening for a new discussion about what should be the political solution. And when this will start to flow, we need to be ready with our answers. And the answers is what we say today. The answers is what we present today. The answers is when we come to the people of Israel and to the Palestinian people and tell them, listen, you don't want in 2 years' time to have another repetition of this terrible, terrible bloody confrontation that kills so many and creates such great suffering. So you have to answer yourselves. What do you propose? Do you think that you can occupy the Palestinians forever? If you don't think so, then what? And the only alternative to this is what we propose. There is no other. I said several times, if someone can come to me and present to me with a solution that will separate the Israelis from the Palestinians, that will end the occupation forever, that will allow the Palestinians to live their way of life the way they choose to live their way of life. And this is not a two-state solution. If there can be something like that, bring it over to me. I'd be happy to hear and to discuss it and to understand it and to learn it. But there isn't. So this is the only solution. And what we need is what Dr. al-Kidwa said before. We need to change our people. He needs to influence his people. I need to influence our people. Both of us need to influence both of our people. And also, we need to have the international community, the governments, your government, and other governments, the European governments, the American governments, to raise this solution to the top of the international agenda so that none of the two sides, nor the Israeli nor the Palestinians, will be able to escape away from dealing with it directly head on and coming to terms with it.
But forgive me for saying the following, because it's obvious. The path we are following or events follow do not go in that direction. That might have been possible if the war had been contained to Gaza. But now we have a regional war. We have war in Lebanon, we have Iran. So instead of moving to that, it becomes even more difficult.
Look, I'm ready to take responsibility for all the mistakes we made with the Palestinians, even when they made their mistakes. I'm ready to take it. But what do you want from Israel with Hezbollah? 24 years ago, we pulled out from Lebanon.
Yes.
We don't occupy 1 inch of land. We don't have any siege of any part of Lebanon. There is this organization which is for years and years and years was shooting and provoking and trying to destroy Israel as the long arm of Iran. And in 2006, I decided, at that time I was Prime Minister, that there is no way that we can continue to tolerate these continued attacks. And we punished Hezbollah. We punished them badly. And as a result, for 17 years, the border was completely quiet. There was no confrontation. At the beginning, everyone said that the Israeli performance in the war in 2006 was a failure. Subsequently, they all understood that it was a great success because it deterred Hamas from doing anything. Now, what happened? On the 8th of October 2023, as the late Nasrallah said with great arrogance and pride, they decided to help the war of Hamas in the south, and they started the attack in Israel. And then subsequently the Iranians, which are the backbone of Hezbollah and the backbone of Hamas and the suppliers of all the weapons and so on and so forth, decided to take part in it. And now you ask me, how can we... look, I hope very much. Israel I think, there is no country in the world that I am familiar with that wouldn't respond when 200 ballistic missiles are fired at it. Now, one can argue whether we are right or wrong, excessive or not, with the Palestinians. But what are the Iranians wanting from us? I mean, what do we have with Iran? 200 ballistic missiles after already second session. I don't have to tell you, my friends. Had one ballistic missile not been intercepted, that was aiming at Tel Aviv with a 1,000 kilos warhead, it would have exploded in the center of Tel Aviv. There would be hundreds of people killed. And there were 200 missiles. Thank God that we, together with America and Great Britain and others, were capable of intercepting almost all of these missiles. But we may have missed one or two. So I think Israel will have to respond. How Israel will respond? I hope, I pray, with wisdom. Can I guarantee that the Israeli reaction will be with wisdom? You already felt what my reaction to my government is, so you can understand that I have some doubts about it. I hope so. I hope that it will not spread into a more comprehensive war, because if there will be a war between Israel and Iran, it will not only be between Israel and Iran. It will be between Iran and the United States of America. Now, I know what the President of the United States, who is presently lame duck, but doesn't matter. Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, whoever will be President of America, if there will be a confrontation between Israel and Iran, and Israel will be in any kind of danger, America will interfere to help Israel. So a beginning of a war between Israel and Iran can spread rapidly into something that will be brutal, devastating, and possibly shaking the entire Middle East and more. So I very much hope that the Israeli response will be measured, that the Iranians will then refrain from furthering it, and that we will somehow be able to conclude the war with Hezbollah. We didn't discuss this is not part of our statement, but I am in favor of a diplomatic solution to the war in the north. I know how to do it. Actually, I prepared a paper that I presented both to the Americans and to the French, who I think both have to further this. And I think that they are trying to do it, and I hope that they will conclude the diplomatic deal that will end the war in the north, that will quieten the Iranians, and that will allow us and the Palestinians to solve the problems between the two of us.
In a way, the wisdom you are asking for is, or could be, what you did during 2006 to end the war on Lebanon, with the reinforcement of the UN presence, etc.
if you want to say that I'm smart, how can I argue with you?
Jose.
Before you ask your question, can I just remind the audience, if you want to send your questions, please do so to the following email address, actividades@rielcano.org.
Just mention that we're also publishing today an analysis about the last year of war and this new type of war, this type of militarism, because I want to linger on this idea with Nasser. What we're seeing is something of enormous proportions. We're seeing a kind of undoing of the sort of the whole land for peace formula. As we speak, for days, there's been a massive operation in North Gaza. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are being expelled. The objective is to clear out the whole of North Gaza, the whole of Gaza City, and the refugee camps in the north. So we're seeing that take place. We're seeing also the annexation of the West Bank, de facto, if not de jure, taking place. So, major transformations. This is not just a defensive a war, and of course the new regional order. I'm interested in what Mr. Kidwa, what would you think about will be the repercussions of this? How can we stop this? How is it ever possible for a sort of de-escalation of this proportion, of this magnitude? We're seeing, we're hearing the drums of war in also DC. Where there is people that see a real opportunity for a complete transformation of the whole region, as if they were playing some sort of board game. This is something that will have could have massive repercussions.
Can I add to that the deafening silence from the Arab states, who I think once again have failed to live up to their responsibilities. There's an important aspect of your plan that we haven't mentioned. You refer to the deployment of a temporary Arab security presence. In other words, you would expect Arab states to contribute troops to guarantee this new status quo. How optimistic can we be, given the lack of spine, frankly, that many Arab states seem to be showing with regard to this conflict generally?
Well, okay. First, let me say that I don't like the term the what? De-escalation? What did you say? Who said?
Militarism,
no, de-escalation.
De-escalation. Sorry, yes.
De-escalation. You don't de-escalate. I mean, you need to have political solution, and part of the problem is precisely the idea of managing the situation and how we de-escalate and put things under control. This way, it will never be solved, and we are really, really in deep troubles. Now, about the Arab deafening silence, yes, part of the problem, as I explained earlier, is the absence of the Palestinian maestro that led to the absence of Palestinian position and then the absence of an Arab position. Let me give you an example. Arab Foreign Minister gave the Americans something that they called an Arab plan. That was a horrible paper. But what is the story? The story was that this was the originally Palestinian paper. So the smart guys put everything that was said in the last 10 years in that paper. So it became 20 page long. No plan, no some kind of steps or nothing. Just, putting things on top of each other, right, left, and center. Nonsense. But you see here the influence of the absence of the right Palestinian contributor that leads to things like that. Not only Arabs did not do enough, but Palestinians are in bad shape. Arabs did not do enough. Europe did not do enough. And I spoke earlier about the international community generally and the failure of the international community. Where is the international law? I mean, we Arabs, Palestinians, always thought that there is double standard. There is one standard to Palestine, Israel, and there is another standard for Ukraine, for instance. It turned out maybe that there is no standard at all for us brownies, nothing. There is no standard. So anything that being said about, international law, the sovereignty, that state cannot control or occupy another state, or that we have the duty to stand up to the aggressor, all this disappears suddenly when it comes to the Middle East. And I do understand. I don't question the wish of the West to protect Israel. That's fine. But they have to protect Israel the right way. The right way. And not to follow some crazy ideas by Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and by extension, the current prime minister. That's not good for the Middle East, not good for Israel itself. And that takes me to your first point. There are arguments that what is happening now is part of an international situation. That you have the changing international order, that you have the old system, the United States, and the emergence of the new system, Russia, China, and things like that. I have my doubts about that. But the more reasonable argument is that what is happening is linked to the internal Israeli situation. You cannot, and that all this are things that we did not discuss before, so I'm speaking on my own behalf only. You cannot isolate what Netanyahu and his government are doing now from what they try to do internally in Israel itself, including the judiciary system and the change and things like that. Someone said the old Israel is the Israel of Ben Gurion. Now it's time for Israel of Ben Gvir. Are you, the West, going to allow this? In the interest of the Israelis, not the interest of the Palestinians only. That should not be the case, and that should not happen. You cannot have just another third world country instead of improving the Palestinian entity towards democracy and towards accountability and towards all the usual things that we used to say. Instead of that, we create another third world country in the Middle East. And we hope that this will be the same. It's not going to be the same. I think this is the real problem, more than the problem of an international dimension and being part of the changing system and things like that. I still, again, I repeat myself, I think I have my doubt about this theory. In general, I don't think that what's happening has direct impact or it is a direct result of a changing international system. I don't think so.
Jose, can I just add something very quickly? Forgive me. Maybe I'm tone deaf, but I haven't heard many Palestinian voices either being raised in the aftermath of 7th of October, saying, for example, this attack on Israel was intolerable, and condemning it wholeheartedly.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Let me tell you, I think generally, personally, I think that Palestinians in general have no problems whatsoever in condemning any attacks against civilians, including Israeli civilians, like the one that happened in 7 October. Where the problem starts? It starts when they feel that the other side is denying them the same rights, is refusing to apply the same rules to them, is refusing to condemn atrocities that are being committed against Palestinian civilians in Gaza, for instance. So they immediately go to self-defense and, trying to resist this kind of questions or this kind of positions, leading to a completely different situation. I think this is generally what happened. Now, on top of that, do not forget the tragedy of the absence of leadership. The absence of leadership causes all kinds of things, including this kind of chaos in the Palestinian situation. Everybody says anything nowadays because there is no one who takes responsibility, who leads, who shows them the way forward. And that is extremely dangerous. But that is there, it is there, and it is causing many of the problems we are witnessing today.
So what we need is enlightened despotism. We need to somehow create a new Palestinian entity with decent leadership, and we need a new government in Israel, from what you were saying, which will also educate the Israeli public in a manner which seems highly unlikely at the moment, if I may say so.
I'm afraid that the Israeli government is not capable of, and is not particularly interested in educating the Israeli public. The Israeli public is trying to educate the Israeli government. And there are quite a few Israelis, I think majority of the Israelis, we have to recognize it, by the way. Today, there is a government which has a small margin of superiority, control over the Knesset. So they are legitimately in power, and they can do whatever a government can do that enjoys the majority of the Knesset. But consistently for the last year, all of the opinion polls which were taken in Israel, all of those opinion polls showed that there is a 70 against 50 in support of the opposition. Sometimes the numbers are changing amongst the different opposition parties. Sometimes the numbers are changing within the coalition parties. But consistently, the majority of the Israelis are opposed to the government, and the majority of the Israelis do not trust the Prime Minister of Israel. So, I mean, in terms of Israel, the state of Israel, the people of Israel, I think the tragedy is that while the government is still perpetrating whatever it does not reflect the majority of the Israeli people. And the question and the challenge that we face, and the challenge that we have to face, is how to change the makeup of the government that will be compatible to the majority of the people and their attitudes in the public. And I think once we will go to election soon, and there will be a new government of Israel, suddenly it will erupt from nowhere. Much larger and broader support for political solutions between us and the Palestinians. So therefore, I think that our challenge is not the government will educate the Israeli public opinion, but that the Israeli public opinion will get rid of this government.
If I may, it doesn't seem, though, that this is really happening. On the contrary, the last days and weeks we have seen a surge of popularity for the current Israeli government. No?
There is no surge, no. The last few polls, they were taken after the targeting of Nasrallah and all the pagers and the walkie-talkies and whatever you want.
To talk about
the total support,
Spain and recognition.
the support for Bibi's party within the coalition increased at the expense of Ben-Gvir's. So the blocs didn't move. Okay, they were the same minority for the bloc of Netanyahu.
Before we turn on to you for opening the floor for questions, let me ask, what would be the actions that could propel your ideas to fruition by, for example, Spain, which is a very internationally speaking active country, the EU, the United States, the region, in particular the what so-called Arab moderate countries? Minister?
Well, the usual. We are trying, of course. We are meeting people. We are publishing articles. For instance, there was a round of articles published in about 25 newspapers in 15 languages, including Le País, for instance, in Spain, explaining what we are trying to do and introducing the joint proposal. So we are meeting officials from different countries and trying to push them to take positions. But to specifically answer your point, it's simple. Just take public position in support of the idea of an overall political solution, immediate end of the war in Gaza, and how, in addition to the overall political solution in the form of two states. I think that will help greatly in pushing things forward and making the public opinion on both sides believe that this is indeed doable and we should push in that direction.
Prime Minister?
You could see already that Dr. al-Kidwa is a very humble and modest person. And I admire him for that. I want to go one step further. Since you asked me a question, I'll tell you what. Yeah, I'd expect the Spanish government, the foreign minister, to suggest to the President of the EU, to propose to the President of the EU to assemble all of the foreign ministers of the European, members of the European Union, to a meeting with Dr. al-Kidwa and myself, to ask us to present all of the ministers our ideas and to decide afterwards that they support it. This, on top of what we can do in separate countries, if
you allow me, the High Representative Borrell has been quite supportive.
Who?
I'm
Mr.
talking
Borrell.
about, there is support. It's starting to build up. Well, what I say, I want to take, since you asked me a question, and since I'm not as humble and modest as the Dr. al-Kidwa, so I'm ready to take it one step further. Make a meeting of all the European foreign ministers, European Union foreign ministers, 27 of them, right?
27, yeah.
27 of them, in Brussels. And break the protocol of diplomatic politeness and, if I can say, hypocrisy. We don't do it because it may upset the Israeli government or the Palestinian leadership or whatever. Forget about it. Present all of the ministers, invite us to present our plan, and then decide that the European ministers support it. That will make an enormous echo all over Europe and in the international community. And then perhaps it will help Americans and South Americans and Southeast Asians and who knows who else. We have to start to do something extraordinary rather than go in the traditional diplomatic, polite, restrained, nice, gentlemanly. Let's not be gentlemen. This is a war. We want to stop it and we want to make peace.
That's the value of being Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Jose, you wanted to add something, and then I'll take some questions.
A quick final word. Olmert, Prime Minister Olmert, I've lived in Israel for many years. I have many Israeli friends, and I appreciate one thing, that they like plain speaking, and they respect people that speak directly to them.
A little too much sometimes, perhaps.
I would say. The world is watching with aghast with the incredible violence being visited in Gaza, West Bank, Lebanon. Not to underestimate the suffering of Israelis and what happened on 7th of October, but this is of a different scale, of a different quality. How did we reach this level of dehumanization of Palestinians, of Lebanese? How will Israel wash its hands of all this blood?
Jose, let me ask you something. You didn't talk about the hundreds of thousands of Israelis that were forced off their homes because their homes were burnt and destroyed in the south and in the north. It's not one-sided. I'm not trying to run away from the excessiveness of what is done in Gaza sometimes. And I speak about it in the most explicit way. You feel mercy for Lebanon, and you don't ask yourself how come is Lebanon controlled for 30 years now by a terrorist organization like Hezbollah, which is completely independent of any commitment to humanity, to human rights, to democratic rights, nothing. Has been shooting across the border for Israel in the last year now against innocent civilians. Today, while we speak, 200 rockets from Lebanon were shot at the civilian centers in the north part of Israel. And more than 1 million Israelis are sitting in shelters in the north part of Israel because of the rockets which are shot from Lebanon, not from us to them, but from them to us. So I don't want to, this is not the main argument here, but we have to look at it in somewhat more balanced manner. It helps sometimes. And the same is, in Gaza, I will never forget, never ever, for the rest of my life, that I was approached by the Palestinian leadership. Now, I'm not talking about now, I'm talking about 2007. After the Hamas campaign against the PLO in Gaza, when Hamas in Gaza killed thousands of Palestinians of the other side of politics in the Palestinian community. Believe me, Dr. al-Kidwa can tell you something about it. I then heard from the Palestinians, they told me, you see, you must understand something, and you know it, but they don't, about the relations between Israel and the Palestinians. When we are friends, we can be the best of friends. When we are fighting against each other, we can be very brutal against each other, unfortunately. But we were never brutal against each other as the Hamas were brutal against Palestinians in Gaza. Never. This is also something that has to be remembered within the context of everything that we are talking about. When he talks about a new Hamas, he talks about an entirely different Hamas. Not Hamas that is ready to kill Israelis and Palestinians, but Hamas that is not ready to kill Israelis and Palestinians, but rather is campaigning for its point of view, whatever.
Thank you very much. We've got quite a few interesting...
Come to defend Jose a little bit?
We just want to hope that we put it all behind us, Prime Minister.
I have a few interesting questions coming in, so maybe I can give the audience a chance. There's a question for you, Foreign Minister. The plan contemplates a corridor between West Bank and Gaza. So what would this new Palestine look like? Remembering also, of course, we haven't really talked much about the settlements. The settlements make a mockery to some extent of a two-state solution. I mean, will all of those settlers be allowed to remain where they are in land which has been settled illegally in recent years, and in fact is currently being settled illegally as we speak? But more importantly, perhaps, what's your vision, sort of midterm vision for this new Palestinian entity? You have very little faith in the Palestinian Authority, you've made that quite clear. You speak of a new Hamas, which I think is aspirational. What would it look like?
Well, I would be very happy to speak in length about my personal vision about Palestine and how it should be. But I'm afraid that this might come as a test for the Palestinians, as a conditional question. What are you going to do? If we don't like what you are going to do, you will not get your state. That is something that we need to put aside. We don't accept this kind of attitude. We need parity, we need respect, and we need the freedom to do whatever we think is good for the Palestinian people. Having said that, again, I would be more than happy to talk about the way I personally envisage Palestine as democratic, as subject to law, as not oppressive, as, all kind of the positive aspects of a modern state that need to be established. Unfortunately, this did not happen. And part of the reason why it did not happen, and here again, I wanted to come in defense of my friend Jose, we have to take responsibility. We should not escape from that. But at the same time, we need to think of the Israeli responsibility as a stronger party, whether in terms of Hamas and what successive governments did to help Hamas, including bringing cash money in bags to deliver to Hamas, and in terms of also the current inept Palestinian leadership that is sitting there for 19 years, as I said, almost 20 years now, without fearing any consequences because of the support given to this inept group by Mr. Netanyahu. So we don't escape our responsibilities, but we have also to understand the Israeli contribution to such very bad situation in Palestine, whether in terms of Hamas or in terms of the current Palestinian leadership.
Thank you very much. There are some questions from the journalists about the 7th of October. And it's true that there is a very remarkable contrast. 7th of October was a massive intelligence failure in Israel, and yet Mossad, Shin Bet, whatever, are capable of astounding the world with these pagers and mobile telephones and so on that blow up in the middle of the night. How do you reconcile this? A massive, unprecedented intel failure by one of the most sophisticated intelligence communities in the world.
I guess that the ultimate answer will be found when there will be a commission of inquiry that will be established sometimes when there will be an Israeli government who will be ready to do it. But I thought, and I thought it from day one, from the 7th of October, on the 7th of October, at some time during the evening when the whole thing in the south was still in the middle of it, and they were still fighting in the different kibbutzim and moshavim there with the terrorists. They were still there. I said it was the arrogance that was responsible for it. The arrogance, the complacency, and the perception of the Palestinians and the Hamas, for that matter, by the Israeli government as inferior. We had all the information. We had all the intelligence. We had everything. by the attitude of the leadership, starting with Netanyahu. Yeah, these Palestinians, what are they capable of? They will never dare try even to do it because we will destroy them. So they tried and they succeeded. And we were asleep. On the 7th of October 2023, there were no military units across the border to stop the Palestinians from, the Hamas terrorists from coming. They just broke through. And because the government and all the defense systems did not give them the credit that they are capable of doing what they did. So the Israeli intelligence is quite good, the cyber is wonderful. They know where someone is hiding in the third floor of a high-rise, and they know to spot the window, not the window on the left, but the window on the right, to fire a rocket from a distance of 100 kilometers that will reach that window and kill him. They can do it, and I don't suggest anyone to challenge this ability of the Israeli intelligence. What we need to do is to somehow become a little bit more humble and more modest and more restrained. And I hope that if there is one lesson that has to be drawn from this great failure, is this.
Mm-hmm. Terrorist attacks are horrific, and obviously everyone condemns them, but in keeping with what Jose was suggesting, I was a visiting professor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem for a few months, and I used to ask my Israeli students, how many of you speak Arabic? In a room of 40, one or two. This shocked me. You know, if only out of intellectual curiosity, if I were Israeli, I would try to understand a little bit of Arabic. And basically I was told that only if you're in Mossad or Shin Bet or in the army, IDF, are you really encouraged to learn Arabic properly. And this has to do with what Jose was raising about the dehumanization, right? The ability of Israeli society, or the inability of Israeli society, even some of our friends and colleagues, by the way, to empathize at a very basic level with their neighbors, literally their next door neighbors. You know, those of you who know Jerusalem well know that this is a feeling that you sometimes get simply walking around the streets. Maybe I'm being unfair, Prime Minister.
Oh, you're not unfair. Exaggerate a little bit, but this is a privilege that, you know, the host is always endowed with.
I'm simplifying.
But I'll tell you something. It's true about both sides. Truth is that we don't, many of us do not speak Arabic, unfortunately, and I think that many of the Arabs, Palestinians, that many of them, that even those who live in Israel, do not speak good enough Hebrew, which is regrettable. I can excuse myself by saying this. One of my sons has a school for languages, private school for languages. Now, he never studied Arabic at school, but he studied Arabic afterwards, and he is now qualified enough to have a school that teaches Arabic, and he is one of the teachers, and he wrote also a book of teaching Arabic for Israelis. Mm-hmm. So privately, in my own personal, private family, I'm trying to change it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid all good things must come to an end. So please join me in thanking all of our speakers. It's been an honor and a pleasure. And in particular, I think we really wish you the best in terms of the implementation of this plan, which is visionary, it's ambitious, I think it's realistic. And let's just hope that there are some wise leaders out there somewhere willing to read it carefully and implement it if possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.